the pattern of alliances is driven by religion. In other words, I look along religious lines to see who my friends are. For Assad, with Shia. Sunni nations like Saudi Arabia, ISIS. Kurds with Kurds. Moderates backing the other rebels. So religious lines are drawn there in terms of who your alliances are with. But everybody's got a backer. Everybody's got a daddy warbucks. And I would argue that until you get these daddy warbucks to create a solution, we will not see a solution, and it will continue to be a bloodbath. And that our efforts should be toward finding a solution that the backers can all agree to. Because then they can tell their respective groups, here's the deal. Do it, or your money dries up. ISIS will probably say no and fight on, but without resources, they won't last long. Modern warfare requires funding, training, logistics. When you see a group come out of nowhere, the first thing I think of is, okay, who's backing them? Where's their money coming from? Where are their supplies coming from? Where's their training coming from? But we'll come back to ISIS next week. There's a little bit more about this particular group of extremists that I want to save for Iraq. Okay. Yes?
I would just like to interject a thought here about my doctor, who was a Syrian doctor in Moline. And he left Moline because it's not safe in Syria for his parents. And he wanted to bring his parents to the United States. And so he went to Chicago to practice because there's a Syrian community up there. And they don't speak any English, and so it was to give them a place to live and safe. And he would tell me how different everything was, life was over there. Like his sister lives over there yet, and how somebody wanted to have a wedding reception, they couldn't find a place to have it, you know, and life was just so different. And the interesting thing he told me was that people would come home from work on Friday night and stop at a market and buy some food and go park along a road someplace and have a picnic. And he says, you don't see that anymore. You just don't see anything like that anymore.
You said it wasn't safe to live there?
It wasn't safe.
Yeah.
It's not safe in there anymore, and people just wouldn't do that anymore. Right?
Oh, not safe there, okay.
Not
yeah.
safe.
Oh,
In Syria,
okay,
I'm talking about,
okay,
yeah.
yeah, okay.
And
Safety is a basic. You've got to have security before you can build anything else on it. Yes?
But it seems to me that these people really don't even want to stop fighting. Now, if you made it uncomfortable by taking the money away, then that might have an effect on what you're saying, draw a circle around that thing and no more money's coming in. So-
That's why you've got to get the backers on the same sheet of music. Right now, the backers are pursuing their very different aims.
And the people are suffering.
And the people are suffering.
Well, a friend of mine was a Syrian doctor who retired a year before I did, and he and his wife went to Damascus to a nephew's wedding, and he didn't come back to the United States. And a friend of his was another doctor, and weekly I'd ask this other doctor, how's Dr. So-and-so? He's been detained in Syria. He and his wife are not allowed to leave. So week after week I would ask. And finally this other doctor said to me, Valerie, quit worrying. We grew up like this.
It's the way it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Syria is the Assad government is your typical corrupt monarchy / dictatorship. You know, you want something done, it's the kickback. Well, you don't get anything done.
Which is also very difficult when the American military goes in. We're so,
Yeah.
you know.
I'm gonna say that's next week on Iraq.
Well, no, I'm thinking not just Iraq, I'm thinking Afghanistan, we are in Saudi Arabia, but it's so difficult for us when we're not used to that kind of bartering and everything for everything to do anything.
Yeah. Remind me next week to tell you how some people who are working at the arsenal are pulling their hair out with contracts in the Middle East.
Oh, well.
Okay, I'll just leave it at that. Because that was part of the situation with Iraq for us. So I would argue that this is one where we have got to get the major powers, the money people, in some kind of agreement to push a solution on the table.
Can you explain why the United States became such a target for radical Muslims?
Oh, sure. Yeah, go back a couple.
Where the United States became a target. for
Yeah, why is it that radical Islam has such a thing for the United States in particular? Well, first of all, we were never friends to begin with. Okay? Because we were the enemy number one because we back a certain country.
Yeah.
The Zionist entity, as they call it, that should not exist and should be wiped off the map. And everybody in the Middle East knows Israel would have been wiped off the map a couple of times if it had not been for the United States. 73 war in particular. We opened up a resupply line that was absolutely vital. Had we not done that, Israel would have fallen. That simple. They know this. So for radical Islam, that makes us bad guys for one reason. Two, do you remember the first Gulf War? Saddam had taken, we liberated, and we had troops in the oil-rich area of Saudi Arabia. Okay? Now, we had told Saudi Arabia that we would leave after the operation was finished. We didn't. The Saudi government said, okay, you can stay, limited here and there. But for radicals like Osama bin Laden, we had broken our word. We are untrustworthy. We are infidels because we are Christian. To them, we are a Christian nation. So we are infidels, we broke our word, we back Israel. Therefore, we must declare war on the United States. Yes?
But doesn't that hatred from bin Laden go back even further to misunderstandings or other broken words in which we were supporting him and then we withdrew all that support?
Well, in Afghanistan, we backed the Mujahideen back in the 1970s. It was a Soviet government in Afghanistan. We armed Islamic extremists and helped them topple the puppet communist government of Afghanistan. So in that sense, yes, we worked with bin Laden. But that was in the 70s. This is the 1990s. 20 years later, we do not leave. Bin Laden comes to the conclusion, we are not trustworthy, we are infidels, we are evil, we must be thrown out of the Middle East.
And why was Saudi Arabia such a big deal that we were in Saudi Arabia?
The ruler of Saudi Arabia, his official title is not king. His official title is custodian of the two holy mosques. One is in Medina, and the other is in Mecca. In the Quran, it says that Muslims should be in charge in Muslim lands. If the majority of the population is Muslim, a Muslim should rule. So, here are Christian forces from a non-Muslim power that have camped out in the holy land of Saudi Arabia, from bin Laden's perspective. And as far as he knew, we could go invade and take over the country. And we could have. We had no interest in doing that, but we theoretically could have. So, we were trespassing, according to folks like bin Laden. Another reason why we got on the blacklist. And began the process of jihad. Oh man, that's an abused name. That's an abused word. Most abused word, I think, in any language. Process of war, of conflict, of struggle, to throw the United States out of the Middle East. And Israel along with it. Still going on. There are some who argue if we had left Saudi Arabia when we said we were going to originally, we might not have had Al-Qaeda. But that, at this point, is conjecture. There was enough hatred with Israel to justify the action anyway. And if you want to do something, you can find anything to justify it. Jihad, just while we're on that topic real quick, means struggle. The greater jihad, according to the Quran, is self-improvement. So you go to the Y, you work out, you lose weight. That is jihad. You're here to learn about the world. That is jihad. You go to worship. That is jihad. That is the greater jihad, self-improvement. And that's how most of the Muslim world understands it. The lesser jihad is self-defense. And self-defense is limited to defense of one's own person and one's own possessions. Muhammad said that if you are being persecuted for your Islamic faith, you have the option to move elsewhere where you can practice your faith, move. Don't fight, move. Now that's hadith, that's sayings of the Prophet. They are just one notch below the Quran. The only war that is permissible in Islam is a defensive war or a war of self-defense. Bin Laden and folks twist that to say that we are attacking the Holy Land of Saudi Arabia to them, and that we are seeking to dominate it and control it and manipulate it. Therefore, everything they do is justified as the lesser jihad, self-defense. And they'll couch it in those terms. I think it's a stretch, personally.
Well, so does most of the Muslim world.
So most of the Muslim world thinks the ISIS and the jihadis are, that's a technical term.
So why doesn't the Muslim world discipline them?
Why doesn't the Muslim world discipline them? They do in many places, such as in the world's largest Muslim country, Indonesia, where the government has been cracking down on extremism for quite some time. They have been in many parts of the world. Arabs are only 23% of the Muslim world. They're a minority. They're not the majority. Bangladesh, India. You don't hear a lot about extremism there, do you?
Pakistan.
Pakistan, you hear of some up in their tribal areas. And the government is slowly realizing these guys are nuts and we're just going to have to go in there and take it over. And they're in the process of doing that. They're preparing as we speak. In certain other areas, if you speak out too loudly or become too visible, you'll wind up dead one morning. Strong incentive to keep your mouth shut, keep your head low, and just go about business.
Like the KKK.
Yeah. In the South, in the 30s.
And remember, we did nothing about them either.
Because some of the governments are tolerating them. Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE, somewhat Oman, Yemen, tolerate the extremists.
Why?
Although not violent, because religiously they agree on so much. Sharia law and how it's implied, and how it's... The Saudi version of Sharia, and ISIS version of Sharia, isn't that different. They're pretty similar. They've got a lot of affinities, cultural affinities, religious affinities. So they tend to tolerate him as the, my crazy second brother. We'll take care of Joe. We'll get it to him. So there's an affinity there we do not share. Most of the world does not share. But the majority of the world's Muslims, these folks are out in left field. Just as the majority of the world's Christians would say the KKK or the Aryan Nation is out in left field. It's just that the extremism that every world faith now has is stronger in Islam than it is in the other world faiths. So this is a symptom of something on the world stage. There are now Hindu extremist parties. Didn't have that before 30 years ago. Even Sikhs have extremist groups now. Buddhists, there are extremist Buddhist groups. You name it. If you want, I can dig them out for you. Okay, any other questions, comments? I seem to be wrapping up a little early here. Okay, well, I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Next week,
Thank you.
Iraq, another multi-party struggle, and we'll get to visit with our friends ISIS again.